Grandma, you are just too much. Look at you, clutching that old bag and coffee like it's your lifeline. Everyone's staring at us. The plans look solid. We can start soon.
Good. The location is key for the project.
She can't know. It would upset her.
I agree. This is just business.
Mom, the memory test results mean you can't run the business anymore. What? This was supposed to be routine. It's to protect you. The business needs new management.
I never imagined that the most painful moment of my life would begin with a single empty stool. The Sunday brunch crowd had filled every table inside Brooks Corner Café, except the last stool at the counter, the one my late husband Robert had claimed every morning for nearly 40 years. I had barely settled onto it when my own granddaughter laughed loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Grandma, seriously, you're taking the last seat from real customers now." The room fell silent. I smiled anyway. Then I heard her whisper to her fiancé, "After tomorrow, Grandma won't be legally competent enough to stop the sale." My blood turned to ice. The memory test my daughter had scheduled wasn't routine at all. It was the first move in a plan to take everything I had spent my life building. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, I'd love to hear your story. Please like this video. If stories like mine speak to your heart, and subscribe if you'd like to join me for more journeys like this. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Reading your comments always reminds me that none of us walks through these moments alone. 6 months before that Sunday morning, I still believed Brooks Corner Cafe belonged to more than a name on a deed. It belonged to the sound of coffee pouring into thick white mugs. It belonged to the smell of cinnamon rolls. Before sunrise, the low hum of gospel music on Sunday mornings, and the familiar scrape of chairs across old wooden floors. It belonged to generations of people who had celebrated birthdays, mourned losses, found jobs, fallen in love, and sometimes simply needed a warm place to sit. Robert and I had opened the cafe 40 years earlier with more courage than money. We had been married for only 3 years when we found the narrow brick building on a quiet street in Savannah. The windows were cracked, the ceiling leaked, and the kitchen looked as though no one had cooked in it since the 1950s. Everyone told us to walk away. Robert stood in the middle of that dusty room, spread his arms, and said, "Natalie, I can see it." I could not see anything except broken tiles and unpaid bills. But I trusted him. We borrowed money from a small local bank, sold my mother's old car, and spent every evening repairing the place ourselves. Robert handled the carpentry. I painted walls, cleaned grease from the kitchen, and negotiated with suppliers who did not take a young black couple seriously. For the first year, we worked 16-hour days. I opened the doors at 5 every morning. Robert baked biscuits before dawn, then served breakfast until lunchtime. At night, after the last customer left, we sat at the counter and counted coins. There were weeks when we paid our employees before paying ourselves. There were months when we lived on soup and leftover cornbread. But the cafe survived. Then it grew. Police officers stopped in before their shifts. Nurses came after long nights at the hospital. Church groups filled the back room every Wednesday. Local businessmen conducted deals over fried chicken and sweet tea. Mothers brought their daughters. Those daughters later returned with children of their own. Robert always sat on the last stool at the counter. It gave him a clear view of the front door, the kitchen, and every table in the room. He said a good owner should be able to see both the people being served and the people doing the serving. When he died 3 years ago, I could not bring myself to sit there. For months, the stool remained empty. After his funeral, I continued running the cafe, but grief made every ordinary sound painful. The bell above the door reminded me of Robert entering with fresh flowers. The coffee grinder reminded me of mornings when he sang off-key. Even the smell of biscuits made me turn toward the kitchen expecting to see him. Linda began helping more. My daughter had grown up inside Brooks Corner. As a child, she had colored pictures beneath the counter while Robert and I worked. As a teenager, she had complained about washing dishes, but she understood the business. She had studied hospitality management at a college in Georgia and spent several years working for a hotel company in Atlanta. When she offered to manage daily operations, I felt relieved. "You've done enough, Mom," she told me. "Let me take some of the weight." At first, Linda kept me involved. She brought weekly reports to my house. We discussed staffing suppliers and menu changes. She asked my opinion before making decisions. Then the reports became monthly. After that, they stopped. Whenever I asked about expenses, Linda gave short answers. Everything's handled. The accountant is reviewing it. You don't need to worry about every little detail. I told myself she was protecting me from stress. Ashley returned to Savannah soon afterward. My granddaughter had been living in Atlanta where she worked in social media marketing. She was beautiful, ambitious, and always in a hurry. She spoke about branding, engagement, expansion, and influence, as though the cafe were an outdated machine that needed to be replaced. She brought Ethan Collins with her. Ethan was polished in a way that made people trust him too quickly. He wore expensive suits, drove a black luxury car, and seemed to know every city official, banker, and property developer in Savannah. The first time he visited my home, he carried flowers and called me Mrs. Brooks with perfect respect. He told me he admired what Robert and I had built. Then he began talking about what the property could become. A flagship destination, he said. Not just a cafe, a lifestyle brand. Ashley leaned forward eagerly. We could open locations in Charleston, Atlanta, maybe even Nashville. I asked what was wrong with serving the neighborhood we already had. Ashley smiled as though I had made a charming joke. Nothing is wrong with it, Grandma. It's just small. That word stayed with me. Small. The cafe that had fed thousands of people was small to her. The life Robert and I had built was small. I did not approve any expansion, but Linda gradually allowed Ashley and Ethan to become involved. They ordered new furniture. They changed suppliers. They replaced the old cash register system with expensive software. Longtime employees began disappearing. First, it was Carl, our morning cook of 18 years. Linda said he had become unreliable. Then Ruth, one of our waitresses, left without saying goodbye. A bread supplier called my home one afternoon and asked why 3 invoices had not been paid. When I questioned Linda, she sounded irritated. There was a processing issue, Mom. It's fixed. A week later, I visited the cafe and found 2 unfamiliar men measuring the back wall. Ethan told me they were evaluating renovation options. No one had mentioned renovations to me. When I asked to see the financial records, Linda sighed. Mom, you're doing this again. Doing what? Assuming something is wrong because you don't recognize every change. Her tone was gentle, but the words cut deeply. She began suggesting that grief had made me suspicious. Ashley was less careful. You have to let younger people lead, she told me. The world has changed. I reminded her that I still owned the company. She laughed softly and said, technically. That word troubled me even more than small. Technically. What Linda and Ashley did not understand was that after Robert became ill, he and I had created a family trust to protect the cafe. Linda had been told she would inherit one day, but she never studied the documents carefully. I had never transferred my controlling interest. 62% of Brooks' Hospitality Group still belonged to me through that trust. Linda managed operations. She did not own the final decision. I kept that knowledge private because I never imagined I would need to use it against my own family. Even then, I wanted to believe the changes came from ambition rather than betrayal. I wanted to believe Linda was overwhelmed. I wanted to believe Ashley was simply young. But late one evening, I passed the cafe and saw Ethan's car parked outside long after closing. Through the window, I could see Linda, Ashley, and Ethan seated at a table covered with papers. When I knocked, Ashley hurriedly gathered the documents. Linda opened the door only a few inches. We're just planning next quarter, she said. Why wasn't I invited? Her face tightened. We didn't want to tire you. I looked past her at Ethan. He smiled, but he placed one hand over the papers as though protecting them from me. That was the moment I first understood that I was no longer being treated like the founder. I was being treated like an obstacle. After I heard Ashley's sentence at the cafe, every sound around me seemed to move farther away. Plates clattered in the kitchen. Customers talked over one another. A child laughed near the front window. Yet all I could hear was my granddaughter's voice repeating inside my head. After tomorrow, Grandma won't be legally competent enough to stop the sale. I kept my face still. Years earlier, during my career as a corporate crisis manager, I had learned that the first person to reveal fear usually surrendered control. I had handled boardroom scandals, employee strikes, and lawsuits that threatened entire companies, but nothing had prepared me to use those skills against my daughter and granddaughter. Ashley leaned against the counter beside Ethan, unaware that I had heard her. She glanced toward me and smirked. Comfortable, Grandma. I placed both hands around my coffee cup. Very. That stool isn't exactly made for someone your age. Ethan gave her a warning look, but Ashley ignored it. She examined my handbag, an old brown leather purse Robert had bought me on our 20th anniversary. You still carry that thing? It still works. So does a rotary phone, but nobody wants one. A few customers heard her. One elderly woman looked down at her plate. A middle-aged man near the window frowned, but no one spoke. Linda stood near the register, pretending to study a receipt. Her silence hurt more than Ashley's laughter. I turned slightly and looked at the last stool. The wood was worn smooth where Robert had rested his hand each morning. There was a faint scratch along one leg from the time he dragged it across the floor during a hurricane evacuation. Ashley saw me touching the seat. It's just a stool, Grandma. No, I said quietly. It isn't. She rolled her eyes. That's exactly the problem. Everything in this place is some sacred memory to you. Before I could answer, Martha Lewis approached with the coffee pot. Martha had worked with us for more than 30 years. She was 71, small-framed, and always wore her silver hair in a neat twist. She had known Linda since childhood and had helped care for Ashley when she was a baby. Her hands trembled slightly as she refilled my cup. When she placed the cup down, her fingers remained on the saucer for a second too long. Our eyes met. There was fear in hers. I looked beneath the cup after she walked away. A small folded note rested against the saucer. I covered it with my palm and slipped it into my handbag. Several minutes later, I excused myself and went to the restroom. Inside the locked stall, I unfolded the paper. Martha's handwriting was uneven. Do not sign anything tomorrow. Check the basement ledger. I read it 3 times. The basement held old tax records, payroll books, equipment receipts, and decades of documents Robert had refused to throw away. Linda had complained that the room was cluttered, but Robert believed history could save a business when memory failed. I tucked the note inside the lining of my handbag. When I returned, Linda was waiting beside my stool. Her expression had changed. She looked warm, concerned, almost affectionate. Mom, are you feeling all right? I'm fine. You seem distracted. I was thinking about your father. Her shoulders relaxed. She touched my arm. Tomorrow's appointment will be simple. Dr. Wallace is very kind. You said it was a routine memory evaluation. It is. Then why did Ashley mention legal competency? Linda's fingers tightened against my sleeve. For 1 second, something flashed in her eyes. Then she smiled. You must have misunderstood. Perhaps. That's exactly why the appointment is important. Sometimes people hear part of a conversation and connect it to the wrong thing. The cruelty of that answer was hidden beneath such a gentle voice that another person might not have recognized it. Linda was already using my age against me. She opened her purse and removed a folder. There may be a few forms to sign afterward, just medical authorizations and temporary business documents, so I can handle things while you rest. Temporary business documents. Nothing serious. She pushed the folder toward me. I did not touch it. I'll read everything tomorrow. Her smile stiffened. Of course. Ashley approached and wrapped one arm around Linda. Mom, don't overwhelm her. You know she gets confused when there are too many details. I looked directly at my granddaughter. She smiled sweetly. That smile frightened me more than her insults. I finished my coffee and stood slowly. My legs felt steady, but I allowed myself to grip the counter as though I needed support. Ashley looked satisfied. Linda offered to drive me home. I'd rather walk. It's too hot. I've survived hotter days. I left through the kitchen instead of the front entrance. The cooks avoided my eyes. One young dishwasher gave me a sympathetic nod. Near the back door, Martha pretended to arrange clean towels. Tonight, I whispered. She did not look at me. Before they move it, I stepped into the alley. Ethan stood beside his car speaking with a man I recognized from the local newspaper. His name was Charles Warren, a senior official in Savannah's planning department. They did not see me at first. Charles held a rolled set of blueprints. Ethan pointed toward the cafe's roof, then toward the neighboring buildings. I remained behind the open kitchen door. The zoning adjustment has to be approved before the financing deadline, Ethan said. Charles lowered his voice. The historical designation complicates demolition. Not once ownership signs the redevelopment petition. And Miss Brooks. Ethan laughed softly. After tomorrow, she won't be a problem. My stomach tightened. Charles noticed movement near the doorway and stepped back. Ethan turned. His expression changed when he saw me. Then just as quickly, he smiled. Mrs. Brooks, we were discussing improvements to the block. With city planning, nothing official. Charles rolled the blueprints tighter. I should go. He walked away without greeting me. Ethan opened the car door. You shouldn't be walking alone in this heat. I've walked this neighborhood longer than you've been alive. His smile remained, but his eyes hardened. A lot is changing, Mrs. Brooks. Buildings change, I said. People reveal themselves. For the first time, he had no answer. I continued down the alley without looking back. I knew I should call Linda and demand the truth. Every part of me wanted to confront her to force her to explain why she was helping Ashley and Ethan. But Martha's warning stopped me. Do not sign anything. Check the basement ledger. By the time I reached my house, I had made my decision. I would return to the cafe after midnight, and this time, I would not enter as a grieving mother or an aging grandmother. I would enter as the woman who still owned everything they were trying to steal. At 11:45 that night, I parked 2 blocks from Brooks Corner Cafe. Savannah's summer air was heavy and damp. The streetlights cast pale circles across the sidewalk, and the city sounded different after midnight. No customers, no delivery trucks, no laughter spilling through the cafe doors. Only distant traffic insects and the quiet ticking of my car engine as it cooled. I wore dark pants, comfortable shoes, and an old rain jacket despite the heat. In my handbag, I carried a flashlight, my phone, and the brass key Robert had given me when we opened the cafe. Linda had changed the front locks 2 months earlier. She did not know about the old service entrance. The narrow door was hidden behind a wooden fence in the alley. Robert had installed it himself during our first renovation. The lock resisted at first, but the key finally turned. I stepped into the storage room. The smell of coffee beans and cleaning solution surrounded me. Moonlight entered through a small window touching stacks of paper cups and unopened boxes. I closed the door without making a sound. The cafe felt like a stranger's home. New framed photographs hung on the walls. The old community bulletin board had been removed. Expensive modern lamps replaced the brass fixtures Robert had restored by hand. I moved through the kitchen. The industrial refrigerator hummed. A clock above the sink showed 12:17. The basement door stood behind the dry storage shelves. When I opened it, cool air rose from below. Each wooden step creaked beneath my weight. I remembered Robert carrying boxes down those stairs, insisting that every document mattered. He had labeled everything by year, vendor, and category. At the bottom, I shone my flashlight across rows of metal shelves. Several boxes had been moved. The old accounting cabinet stood against the far wall. Its lock had been broken. Someone had forced it open, bending the metal around the latch. Most of the drawers were empty. Old payroll books lay scattered across the floor. I knelt and searched through them. Nothing. I checked behind the cabinet beneath shelves and inside a damaged filing box. My knees began to ache, but I kept moving. Then I remembered something Robert had told me years earlier. Never trust the drawer everyone can see. The cabinet had a shallow false panel along the bottom. Robert used it to store original contracts and emergency cash. I pressed the left corner. The panel opened. Inside were several folders wrapped in plastic. The first contained our original deed. The second held old trust documents. The third was new. A bank logo appeared across the top. I removed the papers and read the first page. Commercial development loan. Loan amount $4.8 million. Borrower, Brooks Hospitality Group. Collateral, Brooks Corner Café and adjacent property. My name appeared at the bottom. Natalie Brooks. The signature looked almost perfect. Almost. I always crossed the letter T in Natalie with a long upward stroke. The forged signature had a short straight line. Someone had studied my handwriting, but had not studied it closely enough. My hands began to shake. The document was dated 3 months earlier. On that date, I had been in Charleston attending a church retreat. I photographed every page. The loan agreement included a notarized consent authorizing Linda to negotiate redevelopment. The notary's seal looked genuine. Another folder contained property surveys. Then I found the blueprints. The first image showed the cafe and neighboring buildings outlined in red. The second page showed them demolished. In their place stood a glass and steel apartment complex with retail space, underground parking, and rooftop gardens. The name appeared in large letters. Brooks Square. I stared at it. They planned to erase our cafe and use our family name to sell luxury apartments. A financial summary listed Ethan's company as lead developer. Ashley would receive a marketing position and a small ownership share. Linda's name appeared beside a promised payout. There was no mention of me, no mention of Robert, no mention of the employees who had spent decades building the business. The projected construction date was 6 weeks away. I turned another page. A note in the margin read, "Transfer contingent upon guardianship authority and final owner consent substitution." That was why they needed me. Declared incompetent. They could not complete the sale while I controlled the trust. But if Linda became my legal guardian, she could claim authority to act for me. The medical appointment was not about protecting my health. It was about replacing my voice. My chest tightened, and I had to sit on an old wooden crate. For several minutes, I could not move. I pictured Linda as a little girl asleep in a booth while Robert closed the register. I remembered paying Ashley's college tuition. I remembered comforting her after her first heartbreak. I had given them love, security, and a legacy. They had turned my age into a weapon. A sound came from upstairs. The rear door opened. I switched off my flashlight. Footsteps crossed the kitchen. 2 voices. A woman laughed softly. Ashley. I gathered the papers, returned them to the folder, and replaced everything exactly as I had found it. The basement light switched on. A thin line of brightness appeared beneath the door above me. I looked around for somewhere to hide. The shelves offered no protection. The cabinet was too narrow. Near the back wall stood a storage closet filled with broken chairs, holiday decorations, and old kitchen equipment. I slipped inside and pulled the door nearly closed. The space smelled of dust and rusted metal. I held my phone against my chest. The basement door opened. Footsteps descended. Ashley spoke first. "I still think we should move everything tonight," Ethan answered. "No. If the records disappear before the evaluation, it creates suspicion." Their shoes appeared through the narrow gap in the closet door. Ashley stopped beside the cabinet. "What if she comes looking?" "She won't. You didn't see her today." She heard something. What exactly did she hear? I don't know. The sound of papers being lifted filled the room. Then Ethan said something that made every nerve in my body tighten. "Tomorrow, the doctor starts the process." 48 hours later, Linda files for emergency guardianship. After that, Natalie Brooks can object all she wants. Ashley exhaled. And if the court asks about the signatures, they won't. How can you be sure? Because by then, your grandmother's testimony will be considered unreliable. My hand covered my mouth. They were not planning to defend the forgery. They were planning to make me incapable of accusing them. I stood inside that cramped storage closet, barely breathing. Through the narrow opening, I could see Ashley pacing beside the broken accounting cabinet. She had changed out of her cafe clothes and now wore jeans, a white blouse, and expensive heels that clicked sharply against the concrete floor. Ethan remained calm. He spread several documents across a crate and examined them beneath the basement light. Ashley folded her arms. What if the doctor says she's fine? He won't. You keep saying that. Because I already handled it. She stared at him. How Ethan looked up slowly. Dr. Wallace has financial problems. What kind of problems? The kind that make people cooperative. Ashley lowered her voice. You paid him. I invested in a consulting arrangement. That sounds like paying him. It sounds like something you should never repeat. Ashley glanced toward the stairs. Grandma isn't stupid. No, Ethan said. She's emotional. That is more useful. I pressed the record button on my phone and held it close to the opening. Ashley moved to the cabinet. She remembered the supplier issue last week. She remembered exactly what day the furniture was ordered. She even asked why the labor costs doubled. People with cognitive decline have good days. She has good days every day. Then we document the bad ones. Ashley looked uncertain. For the first time, I saw fear beneath her arrogance. What if she refuses to sign tomorrow? She doesn't need to sign the guardianship petition. I mean the medical releases. Linda will convince her. My mother is getting nervous. Ethan's expression hardened. Linda knows only what she needs to know. Ashley sat on the crate. She thinks we're selling because the cafe is failing. That is the story. You told her the debt was real. The debt is real now. You created it. I created leverage. Ashley rubbed her forehead. And after the sale, Linda receives her payout. You receive your position. We move forward. What about Grandma? She keeps her house a monthly allowance, and whatever memories she wants. The casual cruelty of those words struck me harder than Ashley's laughter earlier that day. A monthly allowance, from property I owned, from money I had earned. Ashley looked toward the blueprints. She'll never forgive us. Ethan shrugged. People forgive when they lose power. Something changed in me then. Until that moment, part of me had still hoped Ashley was being manipulated. I wanted to believe she was foolish, not cruel. But she did not object to the forged signatures. She did not object to the bribed doctor. She worried only about being forgiven. Ashley opened another folder. What about the bank officer covered? And the notary covered? You trust too many people. I trust what they can lose. She studied him. Sometimes you scare me. He smiled. That's why your family needs me. Ashley did not smile back. She picked up the redevelopment agreement. This says Collins Urban Holdings gets 78% of the final profit. Ethan reached for the paper. That's the preliminary structure. You told me the family would control half. The financing changed. You never mentioned that. I'm mentioning it now. Ashley pulled the paper away. And my share, protected. Where in the separate agreement? I haven't seen a separate agreement. Ethan's patience disappeared. You will. When after guardianship is approved. Ashley stood. You're cutting us out. I'm preventing your family from destroying the project with emotional decisions. My family owns the property. Your grandmother owns the property, he corrected. Your mother manages it. You own nothing yet. The words clearly wounded her. Ethan stepped closer. That is exactly what I'm fixing for you. Ashley looked down at the papers. What if Linda discovers the full loan amount? She won't. She has access to the company accounts. She has access to the accounts I let her see. I closed my eyes briefly. Linda had betrayed me, by supporting the guardianship plan, but she did not know everything. Ethan had built separate lies for each of us. He told Linda the cafe was failing. He told Ashley she would inherit a fortune. He told the bank that I had approved the loan, and he intended to leave all three of us with almost nothing. Ashley spoke again. My mother signed the transfers. She approved routine vendor payments. To your shell company. She didn't know that. If investigators look closely, they won't look closely unless someone gives them a reason. He gathered the files. That is why tomorrow matters. Ashley remained still. And if Grandma somehow convinces the judge she's competent, she won't. You sound too sure. Ethan leaned toward her. The evaluation is already written. A cold silence followed. Even Ashley seemed shocked. Before he sees her, he has seen her medical history. That isn't the same thing. It is enough. Ashley walked toward the stairs, then stopped. There's another problem. What, Martha? My heart jumped. Ethan looked irritated. The waitress. She watches everything. Today she kept hovering around Grandma. She's an old employee. She's loyal. To a dead man and an old woman. She has worked here longer than my mother. Ethan considered that. Then fire her. Linda won't. After the hearing, Linda will do whatever keeps her out of trouble. Their footsteps moved toward the stairs. I waited for the basement door to close, but Ethan stopped halfway up. Did you hear something? Ashley froze. What? A sound. I looked down. My phone screen had dimmed, but the recording was still running. A loose metal tray beside my foot vibrated slightly. Ethan descended 2 steps. I held my breath. Ashley whispered, "Probably a rat." Ethan came lower. 1 step, then another. His shoes reached the basement floor. He stood less than 10 feet from the closet. I could see his shadow through the narrow gap. My legs began to tremble, not from weakness, but from the effort of remaining perfectly still. Ethan walked toward the shelves. He moved closer. Then Ashley's phone rang upstairs. She cursed. It's my mother. Ethan stopped. Answer it. She'll ask where we are. Tell her we're reviewing renovation costs. That's what we always tell her. And she always believes you. Ethan turned away from the closet. They climbed the stairs. The light went out. I remained hidden for several minutes after the rear door closed. Only when I heard Ethan's car leave the alley did I step out. My knees nearly gave way. I saved the recording, then checked the files on my phone. The audio was clear enough to identify both voices. I photographed every forged document, every financial summary, and every blueprint. I also photographed the broken cabinet and the hidden compartment. But I did not take anything. If documents disappeared, Ethan would know someone had found them. I returned every folder to its exact position. Before leaving, I examined the loan agreement one final time. The notary seal included a name, Rebecca Sloan. I recognized it. Rebecca was a senior employee at Coastal Heritage Bank, the same bank that had given Robert and me our first business loan nearly 40 years earlier. Someone inside a respected institution had helped steal our property. I slipped out through the service entrance and locked it behind me. The walk back to my car felt longer than before. I had proof of forgery, bribery, and conspiracy. But proof alone would not stop the next morning's appointment. If I refused to attend, Linda and Ashley could claim I was paranoid. If I confronted them, Ethan would destroy the documents and change his plan. So I made a decision that frightened even me. I would go to the clinic. I would sit before the doctor they had already bought, and I would let them believe their plan was working. They had mistaken my silence for confusion. Now I would use that mistake against them. Barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Robert's handwriting beside mine on the original deed. Then the image shifted, replaced by the forged signature that someone had practiced until it looked almost like my own. Almost. That single flaw reminded me of something Robert used to say whenever we trained new employees. People can imitate your work, Natalie, but they can't imitate your habits. The person who forged my name had copied the letters. They had not copied me. By 7 the next morning, I was sitting in David Turner's office. David had been more than our attorney for nearly 30 years. He had stood beside Robert as his best man at our wedding. He had drafted our wills, helped us establish the Brooks Family Trust, and celebrated every major milestone with our family. When his receptionist showed me into his office, David looked up from his desk and immediately frowned. "Natalie, you look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." He stood and embraced me without asking questions. "Sit down." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I simply placed my phone on his desk and opened the folder of photographs I'd taken the night before. His expression changed as he scrolled through the images. The warmth disappeared from his face. "What is this? Look at the signatures." He enlarged one page. Within seconds, he shook his head. "These aren't yours." "No?" "They're close, but not close enough." He examined every page carefully before removing his reading glasses. "When did you find these?" "Last night." "Does anyone know you have copies?" "I don't think so." He leaned back in his chair. "Good." I expected anger. Instead, David became frighteningly calm. That was always how he reacted when something serious happened. He folded his hands. "Let's begin with the most important question. Am I still the controlling owner?" "Yes." He walked to a filing cabinet, unlocked it, and removed a thick binder labeled Brooks Family Trust. "I drafted this after Robert's diagnosis." He turned several pages until he reached a highlighted section. "You retained 62% voting control through the trust." "I remember." "Linda was always intended to inherit your interest after your death, not before. So they can't sell the café." He looked at me for several seconds before answering. "Not legally." The pause frightened me. "What aren't you saying?" David closed the binder. "If someone convinces a court that you are no longer mentally competent, the court can appoint a temporary guardian." "My daughter." "Very likely." "And then, the guardian may be allowed to exercise certain legal rights on your behalf while the case remains active." I felt my stomach tighten. So Linda could vote using my shares? If the court grants those powers, and authorize the sale. Potentially, silence filled the office. The trust Robert and I had created to protect our family could become the very weapon used against me. David continued studying the loan documents. Then something caught his attention. "Interesting." "What?" "The notary." He tapped the seal. "Rebecca Sloan." "You know her?" "I know of her." He stood and walked toward the window. "She's one of the senior notaries at Coastal Heritage Bank." "The same bank that financed our cafe?" "Exactly." He remained quiet for another moment. "A licensed notary risks everything by certifying forged documents. So either she knowingly participated, or someone used her credentials." He turned back toward me. "Either possibility is serious." I opened my phone and played the recording from the basement. David listened without interrupting. When Ethan admitted that the evaluation had already been decided before the appointment, David paused the recording. That sentence alone could change everything. "If we can prove it." "We may not have to prove every crime today." "What do you mean?" "Our immediate goal isn't prison. It's survival." He walked to a whiteboard mounted on the wall. Across the top, he wrote 3 words: "Today, court, trust." Then he drew arrows beneath each. "Today, you attend the evaluation." "I was hoping you'd tell me not to." "No. They expect you to appear. They expect me to panic." "Exactly." He smiled for the first time that morning. "So don't." I looked at him uncertainly. "They've built this plan around assumptions." "What assumptions?" "That you'll confront them, that you'll refuse testing, that you'll become emotional." He uncapped another marker. I want you to surprise them. How? You cooperate. I blinked. Completely within reason. You answer questions politely. You remain calm. You never argue. You never accuse anyone. What if the doctor lies? He probably will. What if he asks me to sign something? Read every page. If they refuse to let me read, ask why. And if they pressure me, David smiled again, ask them to explain. That's all? That's all. He leaned across the desk. People committing fraud hate explaining details. They rush. They interrupt. They answer questions that weren't asked. The more patient you become, the more impatient they'll become. That sounded exactly like Robert. I laughed softly despite everything. You two spent too many years practicing law together. David smiled sadly. We spent too many years watching people underestimate your husband. He reached into a drawer and removed what looked like an ordinary silver fountain pen. Take this. I turned it over in my hand. It's heavier than it looks. It records audio. I stared at him. I started carrying these after a corporate bribery case 10 years ago. He demonstrated the hidden switch. Press once. It records yes. Press again. It saves automatically. I slipped the pen into my jacket pocket. I never imagined I'd be secretly recording my own daughter. David's expression softened. I know. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you believe Linda knows everything? I looked down at my hands. I don't. But she knows enough. She knows they're seeking guardianship. Yes? She knows they're telling people you're mentally declining. Yes? She also stood by yesterday while Ashley humiliated you. I nodded. David sighed. Then we prepare for the possibility that your daughter has chosen ambition over loyalty. The words hurt more than I expected. No mother imagines needing legal protection from her own child. He closed the trust binder and placed one hand on it. Robert anticipated something. What? He worried that after he died, people would pressure you. I remember. Do you remember the final amendment? I frowned. No. He opened the binder again. Near the end was a paragraph I had not read in years. If the acting trustee reasonably believes that the grantor is under coercion fraud or undue influence, all major transactions may be suspended pending independent legal review. I looked at him. So, if we show evidence of fraud, the trust itself becomes another layer of protection. Tears filled my eyes. Even after his death, Robert had still found a way to protect me. David quietly handed me a tissue. He trusted your judgment. I don't feel very wise today. No. You feel betrayed. Those are different things. His phone rang. After a brief conversation, he wrote a name on a notepad. Interesting. What happened? I asked an investigator friend to quietly check Rebecca Sloan. And she requested an unexpected leave of absence yesterday. Yesterday. The same day I overheard Ashley. Either someone was running, or someone had already realized the plan was beginning to crack. David placed the notepad into my folder. One more thing. If today's evaluation becomes irregular, don't stop it. What? Let them continue. The more procedural mistakes they make, the easier they'll be to expose later. I stood to leave. At the door, David called my name. Natalie. I turned. You built Brooks Corner with honesty. They're trying to defeat you with deception. Don't become like them. Win by telling the truth. I nodded. I will. As I stepped outside into the warm Georgia sunlight, I looked across the street toward my car. Linda was waiting beside it. She wasn't alone. Ashley stood beside her, arms folded, and parked directly behind them was a dark sedan with Dr. Wallace stepping out smiling as though this morning were nothing more than an ordinary appointment. For the first time since Robert died, I realized I was no longer walking into a doctor's office. I was walking onto a stage where every other actor already knew the script. The only thing they didn't know was that I had finally learned my lines. Linda greeted me with a smile that looked practiced. "There you are, Mom," she said, stepping toward me. "We were getting worried." "I told you I'd be here." Ashley glanced at her watch. "We don't want to keep Dr. Wallace waiting." Dr. Wallace extended his hand. "Natalie Brooks, it's a pleasure to finally meet you." His grip was confident, too confident. Not the cautious warmth I had expected from a physician meeting an elderly patient for a cognitive evaluation. He smiled as though he already knew how the morning would end. I smiled back. "It's nice to meet you, doctor." As David had advised, I gave them nothing. No anger, no accusations, no fear. Only calm. The clinic occupied the second floor of a modern medical building overlooking Forsyth Park. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh coffee. Soft instrumental music drifted through hidden speakers, while a television silently displayed a nature documentary. Everything about the place was designed to make patients feel safe. Instead, I felt like I had entered a courtroom where the verdict had already been written. A receptionist handed Linda a clipboard. Before I could reach for it, Linda accepted it. "I'll take care of Mom's paperwork." The receptionist smiled politely. "Thank you." I watched Linda complete forms that carried my name. No one asked whether I wanted to read them. Strike one. David had told me to notice everything. I did. Ashley sat beside me, scrolling through her phone. "You don't need to be nervous, Grandma." "I'm not? It's just a memory test." "I know. If everything goes well, you'll feel much better." The words sounded comforting. Her eyes did not. After 20 minutes, a nurse appeared. "Natalie Brooks." I stood immediately. "I can walk." Linda had already risen, reaching for my elbow. "I've got her." The nurse hesitated. "I can manage," I repeated gently. She smiled and led us down a hallway. Her name badge read, Patricia Reed, R.N. She looked to be in her early 50s, with kind eyes and an expression that suggested she noticed more than she said. She guided me into a consultation room. "Mrs. Brooks, we'll begin with a few routine questions." Before she finished speaking, Linda answered. "Mom gets anxious during medical appointments." Patricia looked at me. "Is that true?" "No." Linda laughed softly. "She forgets." Patricia made no comment. Instead, she handed me a tablet. "Could you please confirm your date of birth?" I entered it correctly. She asked my address. Correct. Phone number. Correct. Today's date. Correct. The current president. Correct. Then Dr. Wallace entered carrying a thick folder. Wonderful. He sat opposite me without reviewing any of the answers Patricia had collected. "So, Mrs. Brooks?" He folded his hands. "Tell me why you're here today." "I believe my daughter scheduled a routine memory evaluation," Linda answered before I finished. "Mom has become increasingly forgetful over the last year." Dr. Wallace nodded. "I see." He wrote something. He hadn't asked me another question. Strike two. "Can you give me an example?" he asked. "I misplaced her medication twice." "I found it both times," I replied. Linda smiled apologetically. She doesn't remember. Dr. Wallace wrote another note. Ashley opened a folder. I made a list. My heart sank. She slid several pages across the desk. Dr. Wallace accepted them without hesitation. Very helpful. He never asked who had prepared them, never questioned their accuracy, never asked whether I agreed. Ashley began reading. "Grandma forgot my birthday. I called you twice that day." Ashley ignored me. She accused restaurant suppliers of stealing. I questioned unpaid invoices. She insists Grandpa's stool shouldn't be moved. "It belonged to my husband," Ashley continued. "She forgets conversations. Sometimes she gets suspicious because people lie." Dr. Wallace nodded sympathetically. I understand. No, I thought, you don't. Or perhaps you understand perfectly. He turned to me. Natalie, could you count backward from 100 by sevens? I did, without difficulty. He asked me to remember 3 unrelated words: apple, train, river. I repeated them immediately. He asked me to draw a clock. I drew it. Correctly. He frowned almost imperceptibly. That tiny expression gave me hope. My performance wasn't matching the conclusion he expected, so he changed tactics. Have you made any unusual financial decisions recently? No. Any large purchases? No. Do you manage your business affairs? Yes. Linda interrupted. Not really anymore. I looked at her. I still review important matters. She forced a sympathetic smile. Mom, you haven't looked at the financial reports in months. I almost corrected her. Instead, I remembered David's advice. Let them reveal themselves. I suppose you're right, I said quietly. Dr. Wallace immediately wrote something else. He wasn't evaluating facts. He was collecting agreement. Several minutes later, he opened another folder. I'd like you to sign a few routine documents acknowledging today's evaluation. He rotated the papers toward me. I reached for them. He kept one hand resting on the stack. I'd like to read them first. They're standard. I'd still like to read them. Linda spoke gently. Mom, it'll take forever. I have time. Dr. Wallace released the papers. The first page truly was a consent form. The second authorized communication with my primary physician. The third, I stopped reading. It wasn't a medical form. It authorized temporary assistance with financial decision-making pending further evaluation, exactly as David had predicted. I looked up. What does this one do? Dr. Wallace smiled. It simply allows your daughter to help if necessary. If necessary, only while we determine what's best. I don't understand. It's very common. I'd still like an explanation. For the first time, irritation crossed his face. It protects families. From what? Financial mistakes. I haven't made any. Linda leaned closer. Mom, please. Ashley sighed dramatically. We talked about this. No, I replied calmly. You talked. I listened. Silence settled over the room. Dr. Wallace cleared his throat. We can postpone signatures. Thank you. Strike 3. He had attempted to obtain financial authority during what was supposed to be a medical evaluation. Patricia returned, carrying another chart. As she handed it to Dr. Wallace, our eyes met briefly. Something in her expression changed. Concern. Not pity. Concern. The examination continued for another 15 minutes. When it ended, Dr. Wallace stood. I'll prepare my recommendations. Linda smiled with visible relief. Outside the consultation room, Ashley whispered loudly enough for me to hear. That went better than expected. I pretended not to notice. Patricia approached while Linda and Ashley spoke with the receptionist about scheduling. Mrs. Brooks, yes. I need to check your blood pressure one more time. She guided me into a small side room and quietly closed the door. Then she lowered her voice. You need to be careful. I looked at her steadily. Why? She glanced toward the hallway before speaking again. I shouldn't be telling you this. Telling me what? Yesterday, she swallowed. Your granddaughter delivered documents to this office? What kind of documents? I don't know. But Dr. Wallace reviewed them before you arrived. My pulse quickened. He already had notes about your memory. I said nothing. Patricia continued. He also instructed the staff not to question your family during today's visit. Why would he do that? I honestly don't know. She hesitated. But this didn't feel like a normal evaluation. She reached into her pocket and handed me a small folded paper. It contained only one sentence. Request a copy of today's report immediately. I looked back up. Why are you helping me? My mother is 76. Her eyes filled slightly. I'd want someone to help her. Before I could thank her, footsteps approached. Patricia immediately picked up the blood pressure cuff. Linda appeared at the doorway. Everything okay? Patricia smiled professionally. Perfect. Linda looked at me. Ready to go home? I nodded. But as we walked toward the exit, Dr. Wallace called after us. Oh, Mrs. Brooks. I turned. I'll be recommending that the court consider an emergency guardianship evaluation within the next 48 hours. His smile returned. It will simply ensure you're properly protected. I smiled back. Thank you, doctor. He believed he had frightened me. Instead, he had just confirmed that everything Ethan said in the basement had been true. The ride home was almost unbearably quiet. Linda kept both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, as though every ounce of her attention belonged to the road. Ashley sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, occasionally smiling at messages that never reached my screen. No one mentioned Dr. Wallace's recommendation. No one mentioned the guardianship hearing. It was as though they expected me to accept that my independence had just been placed on a countdown. I looked out the window at the familiar streets of Savannah. Robert and I had driven these roads thousands of times. We had celebrated anniversaries downtown, attended church every Sunday, and taken Ashley for ice cream when she was little enough to ride on my shoulders. Now every familiar landmark seemed strangely distant. Linda finally spoke. I think the appointment went well. It certainly answered some questions. She smiled weakly. I'm glad you feel that way. I turned toward her. What questions did it answer for you? She hesitated. I just wanted to know you were healthy. Healthy isn't the same as incompetent. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. I never said you were. But your doctor did. Neither of us spoke again for the rest of the drive. When we arrived at my house, Ashley was out of the car before the engine stopped. I'll help Grandma organize a few things. I don't need help. It's only temporary. Temporary, another word that had become dangerous. Inside, Ashley walked directly toward my home office instead of the kitchen. She opened filing cabinets. What are you looking for? Nothing. You opened my filing cabinet. I'm just making sure everything's organized. She moved to my bookshelf, then to the desk drawer where I kept spare checkbooks. Linda appeared behind her. We thought it might be safer if we helped keep track of important documents. I've managed those documents for 40 years. Linda spoke gently. And now we'd like to help. Without asking permission, Ashley opened the small fireproof safe beneath my desk. Fortunately, she didn't know the combination. It won't open. I changed it. When? A while ago. She looked disappointed. Linda tried to smooth things over. Mom, no one's taking anything. I watched Ashley scanning the room. Her eyes lingered on my jewelry box. I should probably make a list of valuable items. A list? For insurance? We've never needed one before. It's responsible. I almost laughed. Responsible. That word coming from the woman who had helped forge my signature. Instead, I simply nodded. If it makes you feel better. Ashley immediately began photographing rooms with her phone. Living room, dining room, kitchen, hallway. She wasn't making memories. She was making an inventory. They stayed nearly 2 hours. Linda filled my refrigerator with groceries I hadn't requested. Ashley quietly gathered old bank statements from the recycling basket. Before leaving, Linda held up my car keys. Maybe I should keep these for a few days. Why? Until everything settles. I drove yesterday. I know. It's just a precaution. I reached out my hand. I'll keep my keys. She looked genuinely uncomfortable. Ashley stepped between us. Mom. Linda slowly placed the keys back into my palm. Of course. But I noticed disappointment flash across Ashley's face. One small victory. The moment their car disappeared down the street, I locked every door. Then I called David. They've started. What happened? I described everything. The photographs, the questions, the attempt to keep my keys, the inventory of my belongings. They're acting as though guardianship has already been approved. David was silent. That's exactly what worries me. What should I do? Don't isolate yourself. What do you mean? If they convince people you're confused, witnesses become important. I understand. And Natalie? Yes. From now on, keep a written journal. Every conversation, every visitor, every unusual event. The smallest detail could matter. I'll start today. That evening, just before sunset, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Martha Lewis stood there holding a large container covered with aluminum foil. I brought chicken soup. You've never needed an excuse to visit. She smiled sadly. No? You haven't. I invited her inside. The moment the front door closed, her expression changed completely. Are they watching you? I don't think so. She looked through the front curtains anyway. Only after she seemed satisfied did she sit at the kitchen table. I heard about the doctor's recommendation. News travels quickly. Not this quickly. She leaned closer. Ethan was celebrating. My chest tightened. Celebrating? He told someone the hardest part was over. I didn't interrupt. He thinks you'll lose control within days. I poured coffee for both of us. Martha, how long have you known something was wrong? She stared into her cup. Longer than I wanted to admit. She began telling me everything. About a year earlier, Ethan had insisted on replacing the café's accounting software. Soon afterward, invoices began changing. Numbers no longer matched deliveries. Vendors complained about late payments, even though checks had supposedly been issued. Carl, our longtime cook, questioned several expenses. 2 weeks later, he was fired. Ruth noticed payroll records being altered. She resigned before she could be dismissed. Everyone who asked questions disappeared, Martha said quietly. Why didn't Linda notice? I think she trusted Ethan. And Ashley? Martha sighed. Ashley trusted money. The words hurt because they sounded true. Then Martha reached into her handbag. I have something. She removed a small black flash drive. I copied this before Ethan changed the computer passwords. I stared at it. What's on it? Everything I could save. What kind of everything? Financial reports, vendor payments, internal emails, and transaction histories. I accepted the drive carefully. You've been protecting this all this time. I kept waiting for the right moment. What changed? She looked directly into my eyes. When Ashley laughed at you yesterday, I realized there wasn't going to be a better moment. Tears filled my eyes. After everything that had happened, the person showing me the greatest loyalty wasn't my own family. It was an employee who had stood beside Robert and me for 3 decades. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Folder after folder appeared. Monthly accounting summaries, payroll exports, vendor databases. One spreadsheet immediately caught my attention. Consulting payments. Every month, money left Brooks Corner Café. Every month. It went to the same company, Harbor Strategic Solutions, LLC. I frowned. I've never heard of them. Martha nodded. Neither had I. I opened another file, then another. Every payment had been approved using Linda's login credentials. $5,000, $12,000, $20,000, $35,000. Month after month, hundreds of thousands of dollars. My breathing slowed. This is impossible. I wish it were. I searched the company online. Almost nothing appeared. No office, no employees, no business history. Only one registered manager. Ethan Collins. The room suddenly felt colder. It wasn't simply theft. For more than a year, the cafe had been quietly financing Ethan's own company. The debt wasn't caused by failing business. The debt had been manufactured. And if Linda's credentials had really authorized every payment, I still didn't know whether she had been deceived or whether she had been helping him all along. I closed the laptop slowly. Tomorrow, David needed to see every one of these files, because for the first time, I wasn't just fighting to save my cafe. I was fighting to uncover which members of my own family had willingly helped destroy it. The next morning, I arrived at David Turner's office, carrying my laptop, Martha's flash drive, and a notebook that already contained 3 pages of careful observations. I had written down everything. The exact words Ashley had whispered, the forged signatures, Dr. Wallace's recommendation. Even the time Linda tried to take my car keys. David believed details won cases. Robert had believed details built businesses. For the first time in days, those 2 lessons felt like the same thing. David greeted me with 2 cups of coffee already waiting on the conference table. "You look more rested." "I don't feel it." "You won't," he said. "Not until this is over." I handed him the flash drive. This came from Martha. He immediately connected it to his office computer. For nearly 20 minutes, neither of us spoke as folders opened across the screen. Payroll, vendor payments, tax reports, internal emails. Then, David stopped on a spreadsheet labeled Consulting Expenses. His eyebrows rose. "Well, that's interesting. You found something?" "I found a pattern." He rotated the monitor toward me. Every payment to Harbor Strategic Solutions had been made on the final business day of each month. Every payment increased the cafe's reported expenses. Every payment reduced the company's apparent profit. "If someone wanted Brooks Corner to appear financially unstable," David said quietly, "this is exactly how they do it." He opened another file. Several invoices claimed Ethan's company had provided strategic redevelopment consulting. The descriptions were vague. No supporting reports, no completed projects, no measurable results. Only invoices and money. Lots of money. David picked up his phone. "I'd like someone else to see this." Less than an hour later, another man entered the office. He was tall, neatly dressed, and looked to be in his early 60s. "Natalie." He smiled warmly. "It's been too long." Daniel Foster, Robert's former accountant. For nearly 15 years, Daniel had managed every financial statement Brooks Corner produced before retiring from public accounting. If anyone understood our books, it was him. After brief greetings, David explained the situation. Daniel said very little. Instead, he began reading. One report after another, occasionally making notes, occasionally shaking his head. Nearly 45 minutes passed before he finally leaned back. "This cafe isn't failing." I felt myself exhale for what seemed like the first time all week. "You're certain?" He nodded. "Absolutely." He opened a spreadsheet from 2 years earlier. "Look here." He highlighted monthly sales. Customer traffic remained steady. Another report. Food costs increased slightly. Another. Payroll remained healthy. Another. The cafe generated consistent profit. "So, where did the debt come from?" I asked. Daniel opened a separate folder. "Here." He highlighted several large consulting payments, then inflated renovation invoices, then equipment leases, then marketing contracts, one after another. "They manufactured losses." David folded his arms. In plain English, Daniel looked directly at me. Someone made a profitable business appear distressed. I stared at the screen. So, Linda really believed the cafe was failing? Possibly. Daniel wasn't willing to assume more. But the numbers she saw were not the truth. He continued tracing transactions, then suddenly stopped. "Wait." He zoomed into another page. "This transfer?" His expression changed. "What?" "It hasn't happened yet." The document listed a scheduled transaction, Execution date Friday. 9 a.m., 2 days away. The amount made my stomach tighten. The purchase price for Brooks Corner Café. It was nearly 40% below market value. David looked at Daniel. If guardianship is approved tomorrow. Linda signs here. Daniel pointed to the authorization line. And Ethan's company immediately acquires the property. I swallowed hard. The cafe would be gone before I even appealed. Exactly. Silence settled over the room. Everything depended on stopping the guardianship. Without that, nothing else mattered. Daniel kept searching. I want to see Harbor Strategic Solutions. He opened state business registration records included in the files. The company listed only one managing member, Ethan Collins. No surprise there. But another document had been overlooked. Daniel enlarged it. A banking authorization. Secondary account administrator. My eyes widened. Ashley. David looked over my shoulder. She wasn't just aware. She had account access. The room became very quiet. Until then, I had tried to believe Ashley was simply following Ethan. That belief disappeared. She hadn't merely watched. She had participated. Daniel wasn't finished. There are internal approval logs. He opened another report. Each transaction required 2 electronic approvals, Linda's credentials, followed by Ethan's. Could someone have used Linda's login? I asked. Daniel nodded slowly. Possible, but difficult. Why? Because many approvals occurred late at night, when Linda was probably asleep. Exactly. He enlarged several timestamps. 11:48 p.m., 12:31 a.m., 1:07 a.m. Then another note. Password reset completed by system administrator. Daniel leaned back. Ethan installed the accounting software. David immediately understood. He could have reset passwords. He could have accessed accounts. He could have approved transactions without Linda ever realizing it. Hope flickered inside me. Maybe my daughter had been foolish, manipulated, blind, but perhaps not entirely corrupt. Daniel turned to me. Natalie, I need to ask something difficult. I nodded. If Linda believed the financial reports, would she have wanted to save the cafe? I closed my eyes. I think so. Even if selling it, she loved this place once. David spoke quietly. Love mixed with fear is easy to manipulate. No one argued. Daniel printed several reports. I'll prepare a complete financial analysis. Will it help? It won't merely help. He looked at me steadily. It destroys the entire bankruptcy narrative. For the first time since Ashley laughed at me, I felt something stronger than fear. Evidence. Real evidence. Not suspicion, not intuition. Proof. As Daniel organized the files, David walked me to the window overlooking Savannah. There's something else. What? You've spent days asking whether Linda betrayed you. I know. I think you're asking the wrong question. I looked at him. The better question is, how much of the truth was she allowed to see? Those words stayed with me because suddenly I remembered something. 3 months earlier, Linda had visited my house carrying financial statements. She looked exhausted. She'd said quietly, I don't know how we're going to survive another year. At the time, I believed she was overwhelmed. Now I wondered, had she genuinely believed the business was collapsing? Or had Ethan carefully shown her only the numbers he wanted her to see? I looked back at the conference table, at Robert's old accountant, at Robert's best friend, at stacks of evidence. Then I made a decision. I need to speak with Linda. David immediately shook his head. Not yet. I have to know. You have to know the truth. I agree. But not without leverage. Daniel nodded. If she's innocent enough to cooperate, she'll need proof. And if she isn't, David answered quietly, then confronting her only gives Ethan time to destroy everything. I understood. For the first time in my life, patience was becoming my greatest weapon. Before leaving, Daniel handed me a folder. Inside was a summary of every fraudulent transaction. At the top, he had written one sentence: Brooks Corner Café never needed to be saved. It was deliberately robbed. I held the folder tightly. Tomorrow, I would finally ask my daughter the one question I had feared more than any other. Not whether she loved me, but whether she had chosen to believe a stranger instead of the mother who had spent her entire life believing in her. I didn't sleep much that night. Daniel's final sentence kept replaying in my mind. Brooks Corner Café never needed to be saved. It was deliberately robbed. I read it over and over until the words no longer felt like an accusation. They felt like a responsibility. If Linda had knowingly participated, I needed to face that truth. If she had been manipulated, I owed her one chance to see the evidence before everything collapsed. By 6 o'clock the next morning, Savannah was still waking up. The streets were quiet as I drove toward the cafe. I parked around the corner and walked the remaining block, carrying only my handbag and a single manila envelope. Inside that envelope was one document: the forged loan agreement, nothing else. I wasn't ready to reveal every card in my hand. Not yet. When I entered Brooks Corner Café through the front door, only a few lights were on. The breakfast rush hadn't begun. Fresh biscuits were cooling on metal racks, and the smell instantly carried me back to mornings with Robert. For a brief moment, it almost felt normal. Linda stood behind the counter checking inventory. She looked up in surprise. "Mom, I came early? You usually don't." I wanted to talk. Her smile faded slightly. Ashley wasn't there. Neither was Ethan. For the first time in weeks, it was just the two of us. Linda poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. She placed one in front of me exactly the way Robert used to, 2 packets of sugar on the saucer cream on the side. It was such a small gesture that it caught me off guard. Maybe she hadn't forgotten everything? We sat in silence for almost a minute. Finally, she spoke. "You've seemed different since the evaluation." "I have." "Are you angry with me?" I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "I don't know." Her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I've been trying to help." "I hope that's true." She lowered her gaze. "I know Ashley can be insensitive." She humiliated me. "I'll talk to her." "No." I shook my head slowly. "This isn't about a chair." Linda looked confused. "What do you mean?" I reached into my handbag and removed the envelope. "I found this." She opened it. As soon as she saw the first page, the color drained from her face. "What is this, a loan agreement?" Her eyes moved to the signature. "No? You recognize it. That's your name. It isn't my signature." Linda looked again. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she whispered, "I've never seen this." I watched her carefully. There was fear in her face, but it wasn't the fear of someone caught lying. It looked like genuine shock. This can't be real." "It is." She turned another page. "They used the cafe as collateral." "Yes." "For almost $5 million. "Yes." Her breathing became uneven. "Ethan told me we were applying for a redevelopment grant." "A grant doesn't require my forged signature." Linda closed the folder. "I didn't know." I stayed quiet. She looked directly into my eyes. "I swear to you, Mom, I never saw these papers." I believed she believed what she was saying, but believing wasn't enough anymore. "So tell me what you did know." She covered her face with both hands. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Finally, she looked up. "Ethan showed me financial reports." "What kind of reports?" "He said the cafe had been losing money for nearly 2 years. He showed me unpaid vendor invoices. He said we couldn't survive another winter." I remembered the sadness in her voice months earlier. It hadn't been an act. You believed him? I checked the reports. Were they real? I thought they were. She swallowed hard. He said you refused to sell because you couldn't let go of Dad. And you believed that too. Her voice broke. I thought grief was making you hold on to something we couldn't save. Tears filled her eyes. I never wanted to take the cafe from you. I wanted to keep something alive. I leaned forward. Then why the guardianship? Linda looked ashamed. Because he convinced me. Who? Ethan. He said if you were diagnosed with memory problems, the bank would delay foreclosure. There was never a foreclosure. I know that now. He told me temporary guardianship would protect your assets. And Ashley? Linda closed her eyes. She supported everything. Did she ever question Ethan? No. Did you? At first. What changed? He always had another report. Another explanation. Another expert. I slowly nodded. Classic manipulation. A lie supported by carefully selected evidence. Then I asked the question I had feared most. Did you ever tell anyone I was losing my memory? Linda hesitated. Yes. The word hurt more than I expected. To whom? The doctor. My heart sank. She continued before I could speak, but only because Ethan asked me to. He said the doctor needed examples. I thought I was helping. What examples? She began crying openly now. I exaggerated. I told him you misplaced medication. You repeated stories. I said you became suspicious. I thought... She couldn't finish. You thought it would save the cafe? She nodded. I'm so sorry. For the first time since Robert died, I saw not the manager of Brooks Corner, but my little girl. The child who used to cry after breaking a coffee mug because she thought I'd be disappointed. She had made terrible choices, but guilt had finally broken through the lies. I reached across the table and took her hand. I need you to listen carefully. She nodded. The cafe isn't bankrupt. What? It never was. I opened my handbag again and removed Daniel's financial summary. She read the first page, then the second, then the charts. No. She flipped faster. This says we were profitable. Every quarter? She stared at me. These numbers are completely different. They're real. She covered her mouth. Oh my God. She stood so quickly that her chair nearly fell backward. I approved transfers. Routine consulting payments. I thought they were renovation costs. I said nothing. She looked at the names on the spreadsheet. Harbor Strategic Solutions. Her eyes widened. That's Ethan's company. Yes. I've been sending cafe money to Ethan for more than a year. Linda collapsed back into her chair. I did this. No. You trusted the wrong person. I signed those approvals. You signed what you believed were legitimate business expenses. She shook her head. It doesn't matter. It does. There is a difference between being deceived and becoming the deceiver. She cried quietly for several moments. Finally, she looked up. What do I do? I took a slow breath. You tell me the truth. All of it? No more protecting Ethan. No more protecting Ashley. No more protecting yourself. She nodded immediately. I will. But first, she looked toward the front windows. We don't have much time. What do you mean? Ethan is expecting me at 9. For what? To sign final authorization papers before tomorrow's hearing. My pulse quickened. Can you still meet him? She hesitated. I think so. I need you to. She looked frightened. You want me to pretend everything is normal? Yes. What if he realizes I know? He can't. She stared at me. I've never lied well. You don't have to lie. You only have to listen. She slowly understood. You want him to talk. I smiled for the first time in days. Exactly. She wiped away her tears. And if he admits everything, I'll make sure someone else hears it too. Just then, the bell above the cafe door rang. Both of us turned. Ashley walked inside smiling brightly. Behind her, Ethan adjusted his tie as though he owned the building already. Neither of them noticed the tears still glistening on Linda's face. Neither of them realized that the woman they believed they had already defeated had just gained her first true ally. Ashley breezed through the front door with the confidence of someone who believed the future already belonged to her. "Morning, Mom," she said cheerfully, kissing Linda on the cheek before turning to me. "Grandma, you're here early." "I couldn't sleep," I replied. She smiled without a trace of concern. "You'll feel better after everything is settled." Those words carried a different meaning now. Ethan followed a few steps behind her, carrying a leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm. His smile was polished, controlled, and reassuring, the same smile that had convinced bankers, contractors, and tragically my own daughter. "Mrs. Brooks," he said warmly, "it's good to see you." "Good morning, Ethan." He studied my face for a brief moment. I wondered if he was searching for signs that I knew the truth. If he was, he found nothing. David had been right. Sometimes silence is the most convincing disguise. Linda quietly stood from the table. "I'll make us some fresh coffee." As she walked toward the kitchen, our eyes met for only a second. No words were necessary. We both understood the plan. She would let Ethan talk. I would listen. The breakfast crowd was still light, giving Ethan exactly the privacy he wanted. He opened his portfolio and spread several architectural drawings across a corner table. "Ashley and I were looking over the redevelopment schedule," he said. "It'll transform this entire neighborhood." Ashley grinned. "People won't even recognize this place." I looked around the cafe, the worn wooden booths, the framed photographs of neighborhood Little League teams, the faded wall where hundreds of children had measured their height over the years. "I hope they still recognize what matters," Ashley laughed. "That's exactly why nothing ever changes around here." Ethan gently redirected the conversation. "We're thinking long-term." "So are we?" I answered. He smiled politely, assuming I meant the same thing he did. Linda returned, carrying 4 cups of coffee. Her hands shook only slightly. Ethan noticed. "Nervous?" She forced a laugh. "Big decisions." "They're about to get easier." Ashley reached across the table. "Once tomorrow's hearing is finished, everything moves quickly." I watched Ethan carefully. He nodded. "The financing is already lined up. The city is ready. The investors are ready. We just need one final obstacle removed." Ashley lowered her voice. "Grandma?" Neither of them realized I could hear every word. Linda looked down into her coffee. "What happens after the hearing?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "You'll receive temporary authority. Then we finalize the transfer. Within 48 hours. And after that, the demolition permits become active." I noticed Linda's fingers tighten around her cup. "The demolition? You told me construction wouldn't begin until next year." Ethan waved dismissively. "Schedules changed." Ashley shrugged. "Honestly, the old building isn't worth saving." I felt my chest tighten. Robert had laid every brick of the front patio himself. To Ashley, it was simply old. Linda took a careful breath. "And the ownership percentages?" For the first time, Ethan hesitated. "What about them? You promised we'd review everything before signing." "We will. I'd like to understand the final structure." Ashley frowned. "Mom, we've already gone over this." "I'd still like to hear Ethan explain it." He smiled again. "Of course." He opened another folder. "This version reflects the updated investment." Linda quietly studied the pages. I could see the moment she found what she was looking for. Her expression barely changed, but I knew. The percentages were there, exactly as Daniel had predicted. "Ethan," she spoke softly, "why does Collins Urban Holdings own 78%? Ashley looked surprised. "What?" She leaned over. I thought, Ethan interrupted immediately. That's temporary. Linda kept reading. And Brooks Hospitality receives 22. The equity adjusts later. When? After refinancing. Ashley frowned. You never told me that. I was going to. When? He sighed. This isn't the time. Ashley looked back at the documents. My name isn't even listed. It will be. You promised I'd become a partner. You will. I'm not on this agreement. The tension around the table grew noticeably heavier. Customers nearby continued eating completely unaware that an entire family was beginning to fracture only a few feet away. Linda asked another question. What about my mother's trust? Ethan answered too quickly. It becomes inactive. No. She looked directly at him. I asked what happens to it. He shifted in his chair. The guardianship allows operational control. For how long? As long as necessary. What if the court restores Mom's authority? It won't. His certainty hung in the air. Linda stared at him. How can you know that? He smiled. Because these evaluations are straightforward. No evaluation is that predictable. He leaned closer. I've done this before. The words escaped before he could stop them. Ashley turned toward him. What do you mean? Before? For the first time since I'd met him. Ethan looked genuinely uncomfortable. I meant redevelopment cases. No. Ashley replied slowly. That's not what you said. He forced a laugh. You're overthinking it. Linda remained calm. So, you've handled guardianship situations before? They're business realities. How many? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he shrugged. A few. Ashley looked unsettled. You never mentioned that. It wasn't important. It is to me. He closed the folder. We're getting distracted. No, Linda said quietly. I think we're finally asking the right questions. Ashley looked from her mother to Ethan. Mom? What? Why are you acting like this? Linda slowly pushed the paperwork back across the table. I just want honest answers. You trust me, don't you? Ethan asked. I did. Silence. Only the sound of coffee cups and quiet conversation filled the cafe. Then Ashley spoke. What aren't you telling us? Ethan rubbed his forehead. I've carried this entire project. I've solved every problem. If I simplified certain financial details, it was to keep everyone focused. Linda's voice remained steady. Did you create Harbor Strategic Solutions? His eyes narrowed. Who told you that? I asked the question. He didn't answer. Ashley looked confused. What company, bah? Linda turned another page toward her daughter. This one. Ashley read the document. Her face slowly lost its color. These payments. They've been going to Ethan? He reached for the papers. Give me those. Linda didn't move. Ethan? Answer me. He finally exhaled. Yes. I own the company. Ashley stared at him. You've been paying yourself. It was consulting. For what? He spread his hands impatiently. For making this entire project possible. Ashley shook her head. You told me investors covered those costs. They do. Then why are we paying too? His patience disappeared. Because that's how development works. No, Linda said quietly. That's how fraud works. Ethan stood abruptly. Be careful. Linda stood as well. No. You be careful. You've been lying to all of us. Several customers turned to look. Ashley remained frozen. She looked at Ethan as though she were seeing him for the first time. Then she whispered, Did you ever actually intend for this cafe to belong to our family? Ethan didn't answer. That silence told all of us everything. At that exact moment, I noticed something Ethan hadn't. Near the pastry display, Martha was wiping the same spotless countertop for the third time. Hidden beneath the folded cleaning towel was a small phone with its recording light silently blinking. Every word, every admission, every lie had just been captured. For a brief second, no one moved. The only sound inside Brooks Corner Café was the steady hiss of the espresso machine. Ethan was the first to recover. His eyes darted across the room, quickly measuring the customers, the employees, and finally Linda. He forced another smile. I think we've had enough business talk for one morning. He reached for the stack of documents. Linda placed her hand on them before he could. No? We'll finish this conversation. Ashley looked from her mother to Ethan, completely bewildered. Ethan? Tell me she misunderstood. He didn't answer. Instead, he lowered his voice. Not here. Then where? Linda asked. My office. No. My lawyer's office. No. Ashley stepped closer. Why won't you just answer us? Ethan sighed dramatically. Because both of you are emotional. That single sentence changed something inside Ashley. For months, perhaps years, she had believed she was Ethan's equal. Now she realized he had never seen her that way. She was simply another person to manage, another tool, another signature, another obstacle. You lied to me, she whispered. I protected you? No. You used me. Several customers were openly watching now. Martha quietly walked toward the kitchen. As she passed my table, she brushed her hand lightly against my chair. A tiny signal. The recording had captured enough. She was taking the phone somewhere safe. Ethan noticed her movement. Where's she going? Linda answered before anyone else could. To work. He watched Martha disappear through the kitchen doors. Something about his expression changed. He wasn't worried about Linda anymore. He was worried about evidence. He looked back toward the hallway leading to the employee offices. I'll be right back. He started walking. Immediately I stood. So will I. He stopped. You don't need to. I've walked this building longer than you've known it existed. He smiled politely. I just need a file. So do I. For the first time since entering the cafe, Ethan looked uncertain. He couldn't openly refuse me without drawing even more attention. He nodded stiffly. After you. I walked toward the hallway, forcing him to follow behind me instead of leading the way. It bought Martha precious seconds. The hallway was empty. Family photographs lined one wall. Robert shaking hands with the first police officers who became regular customers. Linda, at 12 years old, wearing an apron twice her size. Ashley, at 5, proudly carrying a tray of cookies she had helped decorate. Every picture represented years Ethan had never lived, years he now intended to erase. He unlocked the office door. I only need a minute. I remained standing in the doorway. So do I. He walked directly to the desk. His eyes immediately searched the filing cabinet, then the bookshelf, then the computer. He wasn't looking for paperwork. He was looking for something that might expose him. His movements became faster. Drawer after drawer opened. He muttered under his breath. Where is it? I watched quietly. What are you missing? Nothing. You seem very busy for someone missing nothing. He slammed another drawer shut. I told you. I'm looking for project files. No, I said calmly. You're looking for evidence. His head snapped toward me. For a long second, neither of us spoke. Then his polite mask disappeared completely. You should have stayed out of this. I tried. You don't understand development. I understand theft. His jaw tightened. You built a neighborhood cafe. I build cities. No. You buy other people's lives. He stepped closer. You have no idea how business works today. I know exactly how it worked yesterday. What does that mean? It means I found the basement. His face changed instantly, just for half a second, but half a second was enough. You were there. I was. You took something. I took photographs. His breathing became noticeably heavier. You trespassed. I entered property I still own. Before he could answer, footsteps hurried down the hallway. Linda, Ashley. Both stopped outside the office. What's going on? Ashley asked. Ethan immediately recovered. Your grandmother has become confused. I almost smiled. There it was again. Confused. His favorite word. I looked directly at Ashley. I found forged loan documents with my signature. Ashley stared at me, then looked toward Ethan. He said nothing. I found blueprints replacing this cafe with luxury apartments. Silence. I found proof that the cafe was used as collateral without my permission. Ashley slowly stepped backward. Ethan? Tell me she's lying. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Linda finally spoke. I've seen the documents. Ashley turned sharply toward her mother. You knew? I found out this morning. And you didn't tell me. I wanted him to explain. Ashley looked back toward Ethan. He still hadn't denied a single accusation. Suddenly his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then answered immediately. What? His expression hardened. When? No. Who froze it? I'll handle it. He ended the call. David. I knew it had to be David. Ethan shoved the phone into his pocket. The bank? What about it? Linda asked. They've temporarily suspended today's transfer. My heart raced. David had moved faster than I'd expected. Ethan looked at all three of us. This changes nothing. It changes everything, I replied. The hearing is tomorrow. I'll still obtain guardianship. You sound very confident. I have every reason to be. I reached into my handbag. So do I. I removed the silver fountain pen David had given me. Ethan frowned. What's that? The entire medical evaluation? His eyes narrowed. I recorded it. No one spoke. The doctor attempting to rush financial paperwork. Linda answering questions for me. Ashley presenting prepared memory failures. The recommendation for guardianship. Everything. Ethan laughed. That recording proves nothing. Perhaps? I nodded. But your conversation in the basement proves much more. For the first time, real fear appeared in his eyes. You were in the basement. I heard every word. Ashley's face turned pale. You recorded us? I did. She looked at Ethan, then back at me. Neither of us corrected her. Because we didn't have to. She already believed it, and that belief alone was enough to make Ethan panic. He lunged toward me. Give me the pen! Before he reached me, Linda stepped directly between us. Don't! Ethan grabbed her wrist. Move. Let go of me. Ashley gasped. Ethan! He immediately released Linda, realizing every employee in the hallway was now staring at him. The kitchen staff, 2 waitresses, a delivery driver, even several customers had gathered near the entrance. His perfect image was beginning to crack. Then another voice echoed from the front of the cafe. Mr. Collins! Everyone turned. 2 men wearing dark business suits stood just inside the entrance. One displayed an identification badge. State Banking Fraud Division. The other held a folder. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding several commercial loan transactions. Ethan froze, only for a heartbeat. Then he smiled again. There must be some misunderstanding. The investigator looked down at the folder. We've heard that sentence many times. He closed it gently. But today, we'd prefer to hear the truth. The cafe had never been so quiet. Even the coffee machines seemed to have stopped humming. Every customer, every employee, every member of my family stood frozen as the two investigators from the State Banking Fraud Division stepped farther inside. The taller of the two men removed a leather credential holder from his jacket. "My name is Special Investigator Michael Reeves." He nodded toward his partner. "This is Investigator Karen Mitchell. We're looking for Mr. Ethan Collins." Ethan straightened his tie. "I'm Ethan Collins." Michael offered a polite smile. "We'd appreciate a few minutes of your time." "This isn't exactly convenient." "I'm afraid convenience isn't one of our priorities today." Ashley looked between Ethan and the investigators. "What's happening?" Ethan answered before either investigator could. "A misunderstanding with one of the banks." Karen quietly opened her folder. It involves multiple commercial loans, and several notarized documents, and allegations of forged signatures. My heart remained steady. For the first time in days, I wasn't the one being questioned. Ethan was. David arrived less than 10 minutes later. He walked through the front door carrying 2 briefcases and nodded at me before greeting the investigators. "Good morning." Michael shook his hand. "Mr. Turner? Thank you for coming so quickly." "I wouldn't have missed it." David turned toward Ethan. "I understand you've been rather busy." Ethan's expression darkened. "My attorney isn't here. Neither is mine." David replied calmly. "Yet somehow we're still having a conversation." Linda moved beside me. She hadn't spoken since Ethan grabbed her wrist. Now she whispered, "I didn't think it would happen this fast." "It was always going to happen." "The truth usually arrives quietly." The investigators requested the use of the cafe's small meeting room. Everyone gathered inside. Ethan, Ashley, Linda, David, the investigators, and me. Michael placed several documents on the table. "We've received information suggesting Brooks Hospitality Group may have obtained financing using fraudulent authorization." Ethan folded his arms. "I deny that completely." Michael nodded. "We expected you would." Karen slid another document across the table. "This is the commercial loan agreement." She pointed toward the signature. "Mrs. Brooks, is this your signature?" I looked carefully before answering. "No, absolutely not." Karen wrote something. "Mr. Collins, you witnessed this signing indirectly," meaning I understood everything had been handled. David leaned forward. "That's not what she asked." Michael repeated the question. "Were you physically present when Natalie Brooks signed this document?" A long silence followed. Finally, "No." Karen made another note. David opened one of his briefcases. "I'd like to submit additional evidence." He placed several enlarged photographs on the table: the hidden compartment, the broken accounting cabinet, the redevelopment plans, the forged documents exactly where I'd found them. Michael studied each photograph carefully. "When were these taken?" 2 nights ago." Karen looked toward Ethan. "Can you explain why the accounting cabinet appears to have been forced open?" Ethan remained composed. "It was damaged during renovations." David smiled faintly. "Interesting. Because the renovation contractor states no such damage was ever reported." Karen looked up. "You contacted the contractor?" "I did." She nodded approvingly. Then David produced something I hadn't seen before: a thick financial report. Daniel's complete forensic analysis. Prepared by certified public accountant Daniel Foster. Michael accepted the report. Karen skimmed the executive summary. She looked surprised. This cafe wasn't operating at a loss. "No," David answered. "It was consistently profitable." Karen continued reading. "Then why was redevelopment necessary?" David turned toward Ethan. "Perhaps Mr. Collins would like to explain." Ethan remained silent. Michael opened another section of the report. "There are repeated transfers to Harbor Strategic Solutions." He looked toward Ethan. "You own that company?" "Yes." "What services did it provide?" "Development consulting." Karen flipped another page. "Can you provide the consulting reports?" "They're archived." We'll need copies. I'll have to locate them. David quietly spoke. That may be difficult. Why? Because according to the invoices, no reports were ever delivered. Karen slowly looked up from the paperwork. The invoices reference completed strategic analyses. She paused. We haven't found any. Neither had Daniel. Neither had David. Neither had I. Because they had never existed. Ashley finally spoke. I didn't know about any of this. Everyone turned toward her. Michael asked gently, What exactly did you know? She swallowed. I thought we were saving the café. Karen looked at another document. Were you an authorized administrator for Harbor Strategic Solutions? Ashley's face turned white. Michael slid the banking authorization toward her. Her name appeared clearly beneath Ethan's. She stared at it. I signed that. Did you understand what it authorized? No, Ethan interrupted. She trusted me. Michael looked at him. We'll ask the questions. The room grew quiet again. Then Linda slowly stood. Every eye turned toward her. I need to say something. Her voice trembled. I filed the petition requesting temporary guardianship. My heart tightened. I believed my mother was becoming vulnerable. I believed Ethan. I repeated concerns about her memory. I answered questions during the medical evaluation. She looked directly at me. Every one of those choices was mine. Tears filled her eyes. I was wrong? She turned toward the investigators. I'd like to withdraw the guardianship petition immediately. Michael nodded. We'll note that. Linda took a deep breath. And I'd also like to provide every email invoice and financial record still in my possession? Ethan stared at her in disbelief. What are you doing? She looked at him with quiet sadness. What I should have done months ago. Telling the truth. Karen reached into another folder. We have one final matter. She placed a printed bank transfer authorization on the table. This transfer was scheduled for tomorrow morning. The amount was nearly $5 million. Purchaser Collins Urban Holdings. Seller Brooks Hospitality Group. Authorization pending court appointed temporary guardian. Michael folded his hands. So the property transfer depended on guardianship. David answered calmly. Exactly. The guardianship wasn't about protecting Natalie Brooks. It was about replacing her legal authority. Michael looked toward Ethan. Would you care to respond? For the first time since this ordeal began, Ethan had no polished answer, no confident smile, no carefully prepared explanation, only silence. And sometimes, silence is the loudest confession of all. Just then, Karen's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen before looking toward Michael. The clinic responded. What did they say? They've released internal scheduling records. Karen looked directly at Dr. Wallace's evaluation, which sat inside the case file. The cognitive assessment, she paused, was completed in the electronic system at 8:14 yesterday morning. Michael frowned. The appointment began at 9:30. Karen nodded slowly. The report was written before Natalie Brooks ever entered the examination room. The room fell completely silent. Even Ethan looked stunned. David quietly closed his briefcase. I believe, he said calmly, the court will find that information extremely interesting. Outside the meeting room, I could hear customers beginning to whisper. The truth was no longer hiding in basements or inside forged documents. It was finally walking into the light. By the end of the week, Brooks Corner Café looked the same from the outside. The old brick walls still caught the afternoon sun. The bell above the front door still chimed every time someone walked inside. The smell of fresh coffee still drifted onto the sidewalk. But inside, everything had changed. The investigators had moved quickly. Search warrants had been issued for Ethan's office, Harbor Strategic Solutions, and several financial accounts connected to the redevelopment project. Boxes of records disappeared into government vehicles. Computers were seized. Phones were examined. The story spread across Savannah far faster than I expected. Customers who had been coming to Brooks Corner for decades stopped me to offer hugs instead of handshakes. Many apologized. "I wish I'd spoken up when Ashley embarrassed you. I should have said something that morning. You didn't deserve any of that." I thanked each of them, but I had learned something painful. Most people don't stay silent because they agree with cruelty. They stay silent because they hope someone else will speak first. 3 days after the investigators questioned Ethan, David called me. "Natalie, they're making arrests." I closed my eyes. I thought they might. They started with the bank. Rebecca Sloan, the notary whose seal appeared on the forged loan documents, had confessed that Ethan persuaded her to notarize paperwork she never actually witnessed being signed. A senior lending officer at Coastal Heritage Bank admitted he had approved the commercial loan, despite knowing Natalie Brooks had never appeared in person. The doctor. Dr. Wallace was placed under investigation for falsifying medical records and accepting undisclosed payments through consulting contracts connected to Harbor Strategic Solutions. One by one, the pieces fell into place. Ashley came to my house 2 evenings later. She arrived alone. No expensive clothes, no makeup, no confidence. When I opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept for days. "Grandma, I know you probably don't want to see me." I stepped aside. "You can come in." She walked slowly into my living room and stared at the photographs lining the fireplace. One picture showed Robert teaching her how to stir pancake batter when she was 6. Another showed all 3 generations standing outside the café on its 25th anniversary. She began crying before she sat down. "I was so sure he loved me." I remained quiet. "He told me we were building a future together. He said Brooks Corner was holding all of us back. He said you couldn't see what the property was worth." She wiped her eyes. I believed every word. I listened. Not because excuses erased what she had done, but because understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Ashley reached into her purse and placed an engagement ring on the coffee table. "He called me yesterday." "What did he say?" "He wanted me to leave town." "He said we'd start over somewhere else." She laughed bitterly. "He also asked me to destroy my emails." My heart sank. "And?" I refused. She looked at me. "For the first time?" I realized he wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to protect himself. The following morning, Ashley met with the investigators. For nearly 6 hours, she answered questions. She turned over text messages, emails, contracts, voice messages, cloud backups. Everything Ethan had ever shared with her. When she finished, Michael Reeves called David. "Your granddaughter just gave us enough evidence to understand the entire scheme." That afternoon, David came to my house carrying a folder. "It's over." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" Ethan confessed to portions of the financial fraud. I wasn't surprised. Only portions. He still blames everyone else. David sat across from me. "But there's something you should know." He handed me another document. It contained copies of emails recovered from Ethan's laptop. One subject line immediately caught my attention. "Exit strategy." I began reading. The messages outlined a plan. Once Brooks Corner had been redeveloped and sold, Ethan intended to transfer most of the profits into offshore accounts owned by another corporation. There was no mention of Ashley, no mention of Linda, no mention of Brooks Hospitality, only Ethan. Near the bottom was one sentence that made my chest tighten. "Ashley believes she'll become a partner. Once permits are finalized, ending the engagement will simplify everything." I read it twice, then a third time. Ashley had betrayed me, but Ethan had never intended to reward her. She had simply been another piece on his chessboard. Later that evening, Linda arrived after closing the cafe. She looked exhausted. "I resigned." I wasn't surprised. "I thought you might." I couldn't continue pretending nothing happened. She placed her manager's keys on my kitchen table. I don't deserve this position. I looked at the keys for a long moment. No, you don't. Tears filled her eyes. I understand. But I gently pushed the keys back toward her. You don't rebuild trust by walking away. She looked confused. You rebuild it by staying. I don't know if anyone will forgive me. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. One honest decision at a time. She nodded slowly. What do I do now? You start where every employee starts. She looked at me uncertainly. In the kitchen. She almost smiled through her tears. I haven't washed dishes in 25 years. Then it's time to remember. 2 weeks later, Ashley asked to see me one last time before formal charges were filed. We met in the cafe before opening. The last stool at the counter remained empty. She stood beside it. I don't expect forgiveness. I nodded. Good, because I can't give it yet. She lowered her eyes. I deserve whatever happens. I walked to the counter and rested my hand on Robert's stool. Do you know why your grandfather loved this seat? She shook her head. He said it reminded him that everyone who entered this cafe deserved to be seen. I looked at her carefully. You stopped seeing people. You saw opportunities. You saw property. You saw money. But you stopped seeing family? Tears rolled silently down her face. I'm sorry. I know. I truly am. I believe you. She looked surprised. You do? Yes. But remorse doesn't erase consequences. It only decides what kind of person you become after them. Ashley nodded. I'll tell the investigators everything else. Everything? No more lies. No more protecting anyone. I placed my hand over hers. That's the first honest decision you've made in a very long time. She squeezed my hand gently before letting go. As she walked toward the door, she paused. Grandma. Yes. I hope someday. When people say the name Brooks, they remember you. Not me. I watched her leave without answering, because I already knew something she was only beginning to understand. A family's name isn't protected by hiding the truth. It's protected by having the courage to face it. 3 months later, the first thing people noticed when they walked into Brooks Corner Cafe wasn't the fresh paint or the polished wooden floors. It was the laughter. Real laughter. The kind that comes from people who trust one another again. The investigation had officially ended. Ethan Collins pleaded guilty to multiple counts of financial fraud conspiracy and forgery after overwhelming evidence left him with little room to deny what he had done. Dr. Wallace lost his medical license and faced criminal charges related to falsifying medical evaluations. Rebecca Sloan and the bank officer accepted plea agreements after cooperating with investigators. Justice had arrived. Not quickly, not perfectly, but honestly, Brooks Corner Cafe remained exactly where Robert and I had built it 40 years earlier. The luxury apartment project called Brooks Square existed only as a stack of abandoned blueprints locked away in an evidence room. Sometimes I smiled just thinking about that. The hardest part wasn't saving the cafe. It was deciding what to do with my own family. Linda kept her promise. On the Monday after resigning as manager, she arrived before sunrise, wearing the same simple apron every new employee received. No office, no title, no authority, just work. She washed dishes, prepared vegetables, cleaned tables. When customers recognized her, many looked surprised. Some criticized her. Others quietly wished her well. She accepted every reaction without defending herself. One afternoon, I found her scrubbing the kitchen floor. You know someone else can do that, I said. She smiled without looking up. I know, but I need to remember what this place was built on. Hard work. She nodded. And humility. That was the first time in months I saw a glimpse of the little girl Robert and I had raised. Not because she asked for forgiveness, because she had stopped expecting it to come quickly. Martha refused the promotion at first. "Oh no," she laughed. "I'm too old for paperwork." I laughed with her. "So am I." She eventually accepted the position of employee manager on one condition: nobody gets treated like they're invisible. She meant every word. She introduced profit sharing for long-term employees. Every person who had stayed loyal through the crisis received a percentage of the cafe's annual profits. Carl returned to the kitchen. Ruth came back to waiting tables. Several former employees who had left during Ethan's time found their way home. The cafe felt like a family again. Not because we shared blood, because we shared honesty. Ashley accepted responsibility in court. Her attorney negotiated a plea agreement after she provided extensive cooperation during the investigation. She received probation, community service, financial restitution, and mandatory ethics counseling. Some people said she deserved prison. Others believed she had already suffered enough. I wasn't asked to decide her sentence. Only the judge could do that. But I was asked whether I wished to address the court. I stood slowly and looked toward my granddaughter. She never lifted her eyes. "Your Honor," I said, "I lost money. I almost lost my business. I nearly lost my independence. But the greatest loss would have been allowing bitterness to decide who I become." I paused. I'm not asking this court to ignore what Ashley did. I'm asking the court to remember that accountability and mercy are not enemies. They simply serve different purposes. Ashley began crying quietly. I continued, "Whatever sentence you impose, I hope it teaches her how precious trust truly is." The courtroom remained silent. When the hearing ended, Ashley approached me. "I don't deserve another chance." "No one deserves one," I replied gently. "That's why they're called second chances." On the anniversary of Brooks Corner Cafe's opening, we held the largest celebration in its history. Old customers returned with children and grandchildren. Former employees traveled from other states. Photographs of Robert covered one wall. At the center of the cafe stood the last stool, the same stool Ashley had laughed about months earlier, the same stool where Robert had greeted thousands of customers. Beneath it, I had attached a small brass plaque. It read, "Respect is earned. Dignity is shared." People stopped to read it throughout the day. Many asked why I chose those words. I simply smiled. Those who needed the explanation already knew it. Late that afternoon, Ashley quietly walked into the cafe after finishing her community service shift. She wore a simple blue shirt and carried no designer handbag. She looked older somehow, not in years, in understanding. She approached the counter. Without saying a word, she gently touched the last stool. Then she looked at me. "Grandma, the seat is yours." Several people nearby stopped talking. They remembered. They remembered the laughter, the humiliation, the beginning of everything. I walked toward the stool. For just a moment, I rested my hand on the worn wooden seat Robert had loved. Then the front door opened. An elderly woman entered using a walker. She looked uncertain, scanning the crowded cafe for somewhere to sit. Without hesitation, I smiled. "Ma'am?" She looked at me. "Would you honor me by taking this seat?" She seemed surprised. "Oh, I couldn't?" "I insist." She slowly sat on the stool. The entire cafe watched quietly. Ashley stood beside me. "I thought you'd finally sit there." I looked at the stranger smiling as a waitress placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of her. "I already have." Ashley frowned. "What do you mean?" I placed one arm gently around her shoulders. "Your grandfather always said the best seat in the house isn't valuable because you own it. It's valuable because you choose who feels welcome in it." Ashley wiped away another tear. "I understand now." "I hope so. Because one day This cafe won't remember who owned it. It will remember how people were treated inside it. As the afternoon sun poured through the front windows, I looked around Brooks Corner Cafe. Employees laughing together. Linda helping a young waitress carry dishes. Martha greeting regular customers by name. Children coloring on paper placemats, exactly as Linda once had. The cafe wasn't perfect. Neither was our family. Perhaps it never would be. But perfection had never been Robert's dream. His dream had been something much simpler. To build one place where people felt respected. One place where kindness mattered more than status. One place where no one would ever be made to feel small for growing older. That afternoon, I realized his dream had survived. Not because we defeated greed, but because we refused to let greed become our legacy. Sometimes life doesn't break our hearts all at once. It happens quietly through small compromises, misplaced trust, and the painful realization that the people we love the most are still capable of making terrible choices. What happened to me wasn't just about a cafe, a business, or a legal battle. It was about discovering that trust is one of the most valuable things we ever give away. And once it's broken, rebuilding, it takes far more courage than destroying it ever did. One of the hardest lessons I learned is that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. For years, I believed that staying patient, forgiving quickly, and putting family first would always be enough. But love without wisdom can leave us vulnerable. Setting healthy boundaries doesn't mean you love someone less. It means you respect yourself enough to protect what you've spent a lifetime building. I also learned that the truth has an incredible kind of patience. Lies can move fast. They can sound convincing, wear expensive clothes, and even come wrapped in the voices of people we trust. But the truth doesn't have to shout. It waits. It survives. And when it finally comes into the light, it has a way of setting everything back in its proper place. That doesn't mean justice always arrives quickly, but it does mean integrity is never wasted. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, nor does it excuse betrayal. Instead, it frees our own hearts from becoming prisoners of anger. At the same time, trust must be earned again through consistent actions, honest choices, and genuine humility. Real reconciliation isn't built with promises. It is built one truthful day at a time. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone you know, or made you think differently about family loyalty or second chances, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments below. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Or have you ever been given a second chance that changed your life? No matter where you're watching from, let us know your city, state, or country. We'd love to see how many wonderful people are part of this community around the world. And if stories like this inspire you, encourage you, or simply remind you that kindness and truth still matter, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you won't miss the next story. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, take care of yourself, cherish the people who truly stand beside you, and never underestimate the quiet strength of an honest heart.